So it is a very, very difficult thing to pioneer at your age or in your journey for Stephen, what wasn't done for you. It's pioneering. And that, most of us, if we're honest, are settlers. And unfortunately, it's not. I'm not even talking about passivity. I'm just saying you don't know what you don't know.
I've been in this message for 15 years. It took me 10 to get to where I could pioneer that ground with my son.
With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoe's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful inns for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more.
Welcome to the Exploring More podcast. Michael Thompson hanging out here with SJ and continuing our exploration of what's wrong with men.
Maybe
the subtitle. Well, it's getting extensive. You know, we're into the fourth session, and I think
there's a reason.
I think I will stand in honor of that and say, this is us trying to give credence and credibility to it's significant ingredients and variables that have led men to the position that we are in society. And this is why we believe if men are such a big, significant part of the problem, maybe men could be a significant part of the solution. Yeah. And so we have been talking about and doing some research and exploring this, not only our own lives and stories, but also our experience with hundreds of men around the country and conversations we're in every day. And then
we've been doing this too long, talking to too many men to not see the commonality of problems. And
then there's society and psychology. I mean, there's plenty of people that are talking about the same things, maybe even in the same ways or similar ways. Dr. Phil, Jordan Peterson, you know, there's some voices that are really stepping, you know, deeply into the whole, cultural, societal, and observation of masculinity, of relationships, of fatherhood. So I think continuing to make sure that we honor it as we step into soon, I hope. What do you do? How do you get out of this mess? You know, I think of debts, debt consolidation. I mean, how do you leverage a short amount of time to get rid of so much?
Yeah, thinking of Dave,
accumulated debt.
Dave Ramsey calls it the debt snowball. Like, is there a debt snowball that we can implement here? And I think once you start to realize what's going on, I've seen it in my own life. Like,
you start to move.
I start to move differently, and I just start accumulating more and more positivity and positive results. Yeah. Versus, the wages of operating in all the ways that we've been talking about.
And if it's a fiscal debt with these high interest rates, you've got to make some allotments and changes and shifts. You've got to try to bring that into a place where it can be chipped away at. It can be
get rid of the highest interest ones first. And refinance
all of that,
and all that,
and have a plan. And that's where I want to get to. Before we just dive into some last kind of some cultural observations is to take a quick break and let Caleb roll a little bit about the upcoming Women's Deepening Weekend, which we are very excited about. We'll be right back on the Exploring More podcast.
And at the time I had attended the deepening weekend was a pretty dark part of my life. I had a very sick child and was feeling just very overwhelmed because I felt like nobody understood my situation.
I was in a place before the journey of just being lonely. The first day when there was like 50 women on the launch team, and I feel us as women, we can be pretty standoffish to each other, but then when they started talking, my heart just warmed up to the women. It's like, we all are in the same place and we all have hearts to want to know each other.
I think for me, on this journey of healing, I have seen and felt God's presence, and He cares. He is there in the process. He is so tender and so full of mercy, even in the pain or even with the tears. And at first you might think, I don't want to feel that. I don't want to go there. And it's hard. But I will tell you, once you get through the other side and feel the healing that has taken place, then you come to a place where you do actually want more.
It was just so valuable to be with other women, to feel heard and to hear other people's stories and feel less alone on the journey, and to remember who I am and who God is and what He is capable of doing, and that you don't have to carry it alone.
We women, we really, if you think about it, we want that sense of community. Some of us have been hurt by that from other things in your past. Don't let that hinder you because it's different. I promise you.
I'm telling you, if you're a woman listening to our podcast, thank you. Number one. Number two, I can't stress enough how much we would love to. We're a couple of the few men that are even on campus in that weekend.
I just had another conversation with a guy, and I told him it's $500 if you want to come and like watch from the cheap seats.
Oh,
help move chairs, all that.
Do we have where there's?
I should make it 1,000.
I think of the when they're interrogating a.
The one-way mirror.
The one-way mirror.
Yeah, or like the crying room in a church.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where we should put the dudes that pay $1,000 a head. Yeah, to
that's
come
interesting.
Watch it. It's really amazing. It's an incredible weekend, and I don't mean to make it sound like we're stalking or something, but it's just it's a beautiful thing to behold.
It's helpful for us. It's been helpful for us to not only see women we love and care about, Robin and Sherry, present, share, offer, and help create that space for women, but to experience what God does. For the feminine hearts.
It's one of the greatest privileges in the context of what we get to do here at Zoe, is to go and work with the team and be a part of the team at the Women's Deepening Weekend. Sherry told me after the last event, because we try to be really sensitive about our presence, because it's a women's weekend.
Yeah.
We try to stay in the
absolutely.
background, stay really hidden and kind of out of sight.
Because we know that the culprits in most of these ladies'
exactly
stories.
what we're talking about in these podcasts. But what Sherry said was the way we were able to move through the weekend and help the ladies that were there and serve them. She had one woman tell her it's the first time a man has ever loved her well, was experiencing one of our team of men there at the Deepening Weekend. It's it's an amazing honor and privilege to get to do that.
Yeah. I don't know if that's sad or that's great.
Both.
Maybe a little
Probably
bit.
both.
Maybe a little bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that we had a chance to maybe bring some remedy to something that was hurting for sure in her.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to just do it as quick as word association, but I want to, in this episode, I just want to talk about a handful of other variables that have led us to this place.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we could do podcasts on every one, and research and evidence, but we're not going to do that. We're just going to try to honor them with mentioning them and talk about their part in the disorientation of men and the generational ability that the enemy has had at working into masculinity such a dangerous reputation and prospect. So going back into the let's go back into the late 30s, early 40s, and this is up your wheelhouse because we both have a bit of World War II sentiment and World War II fascination and World War II appreciation.
Yeah.
So, in America, that event did a number on men and their hearts. It affected almost everybody in the country. If it wasn't your son that was killed, or dad
mm-hmm.
that was killed, it was your son or your dad who came home.
Mm-hmm.
And then you became a dad 30, 20, 15 years later. So I guess, SJ, as I want to honor those who have fought bravely, but also recognize that they came home broken. And wounded and broken men will affect the next generation somehow in ways that their woundedness and brokenness.
Tree is known by its fruit.
Yeah, and I'm not even talking now about the church, which we talked about.
No, I'm just that's
and religious spaces and faith, and
if the tree is bearing fruit, children that have no emotional connection to their fathers, have no hand of guidance other than to reprimand or rebuke. I mean, that produces a certain kind of fruit.
Yeah. So that, my grandfather, my dad's dad, fought in World War II. We've had stories and conversations about the 45th Infantry. A lot of combat days. Anyway, he comes home, talking about my personal story now as it relates to my dad. He comes home and is just shut down. My dad's 5 when he really meets his dad, my grandfather, Thompson. And my dad lives with the confusion that literally this is how sinister it was. It wasn't something's wrong with my dad. Of course, a 5 and 6 and 8, and now you're 10 and 12. It's something's wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
He won't, and he can't. He won't engage with me. And if and when he does, it's punitive.
Yeah, not good.
So, that's just some headlines to just say. So my dad's story, and I've written it in a few books, and was I'm not going to be like that. Mm-hmm. So out of the woundedness, I get a dad who's very engaged and very active, and yet my dad wasn't initiated and wasn't validated, wasn't trained and he was out there learning in the dark. I'm not talking about dark and kingdom of darkness. I'm just talking about it's in the dusk of, is this right? Am I doing this right?
It's so interesting, man. Knowing your story, knowing that part of your story, your father's story, your grandfather's story, and your dad's effort to, I'm not going to be like that. And yet the message that was delivered to you was, why won't my dad engage with me?
Well, and it's a message.
Why didn't he talk to me?
It's a message.
Talk to me about girls.
Why
didn't he show me this?
If we line up 100 guys, there's not half. There's 75 and 80, 90, because you're making my point. Generationally, this has an effect. And even with a dad who was very engaged as us as boys, because I didn't even know what my dad did for work for a lot of years. I just know when he came home, it's on. He was with us. There were balls and bats and sprinklers and in the garage. There was hammers and nails. I mean, my dad was very engaged in all of that. And then there became a time where I think with younger siblings and, the house is pretty full. You're
becoming more self-sufficient.
He's keeping my siblings alive, and we're on. I saw on an Instagram. It was a gang of kids, all with long hair and striped, and all on bikes, man.
Oh yeah,
all on BMX and Schwinn's, and it's just like this is how we rolled.
We patrolled the neighborhood.
And I was just like, and we were gone for 5 hours. Mom thought we were riding our bikes around the neighborhood for 5 hours. No. We went 5 miles to the court. So anyway, I to your point, I think that generationally we look back at World War II, the effect. So I had another grandfather who didn't. Had an uncle who couldn't get in. People killed themselves. Young men who couldn't go fight. It was a rite of passage.
Talk about World War II.
World War II. It was a rite of passage that, no, you're not good enough. You're not whole. You're not. I mean, this war, whether you fought or not, it affected everybody. And then I want to talk about the economy. So this is just another area that influences men in their ability to provide, and finances and economy and classes. Wherever you landed, whether it's trailer parks or country clubs, money doesn't
doesn't solve these problems.
Initiation and validation, intentional initiation and validation. And so Howard Hendricks, the old seminary professor from Dallas Theological Seminary, who was friends with so many of the different national and international ministries, was a speaker. You cannot give what you do not possess. So it is a very, very difficult thing to pioneer at your age or in your journey for Stephen, what wasn't done for you. It's pioneering. And that, most of us, if we're honest, are settlers. And unfortunately, it's not. I'm not even talking about passivity. I'm just saying you don't know what you don't know.
I've been in this message for 15 years. It took me 10 to get to where I could pioneer that ground with my son
and establish some new territories and some new spaces.
Yeah.
So this is all part of what's wrong with men. I think we inherited, some false ideas about what a man was, and from a generation and the generation before them that endured some things, whether it be the stock market crash, great grandfathers or great great grandfathers. But here's the point. There's so little intentional or formal training, validation, and initiation in masculinity that we've co-opted it to churches in spiritual ways, or we've co-opted it to schools, Christian schools, private schools. We've co-opted our butts off in ways that they're not going to be able to handle the weight of a young masculine heart in need of a father, grandfathers, uncles, other coaches, men. So
even when there's a surrogate around, I'm thinking of the clip I used from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air at the men's weekend. Even when Uncle Phil is there, there's still this cry of the heart, like, why doesn't my father want to engage with me?
If there's an Uncle Phil to help answer that and to hold you and to say, I know it's not the way it's supposed to be. but I'm here.
That's helpful.
That's rescue.
Sure.
So then in economy, and I get it, man, but you and I are probably the last generation where there might have been in our elementary school, junior high, and high school, and you're younger than me by just a couple of years, but we are probably the last generation that had male teachers that were probably closer to a 50-50 ratio.
Oh yeah,
in the school.
I can
Principals,
picture 3 of them right now.
Principals,
right off the top of my head.
Vice principals, and I am not saying that those noble roles were not worthy of women in the school systems. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm saying that because of the financial limits put on teachers in education, a lot of teaching jobs became secondary income jobs. And so we saw women stepping in as a primary job for them, but maybe a second job in the household. But and the challenge is that right now, even women or men, it's very hard to live on a teacher's salary now. So now you've got added classrooms, and I'm not proposing that we fix this. I'm just saying, added numbers and now classes are extremely
much
large and difficult to manage for a variety of reasons. I mean, there's a lot of problems in that space.
Yeah.
But I think that, when we look at one other social construct that added to this is the family, and divorces, breakups, that whole thing. So
really went through the roof when you and I were kids. Like, not that our parents divorced, but that's when it really started to spike, is in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah. So I guess, SJ, what I'm trying to do is if we start putting all these different variables, kind of on the board, and I want to add a few more, but divorce, huge. Now dad's not even here. Single parent moms, and they're not the only ones. I mean,
and like your dad did when he was 5 or 6 or 7 years old, it's not what's wrong with my dad who's coming back from World War II. It's what's wrong with me.
What?
Same thing in divorce.
Yeah.
Kids look at that as, it must have been something I did.
Yeah.
It must be my fault somehow.
Yeah. Yeah. Technology revolution's another thing, man. So, back in the day, you had families that stayed and lived in geographies and spaces that they're 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. I mean, people didn't move away from the town they grew up in. The coffee shop was full of the old guys and the next guys, so you've got that, the nuclear family, and its effect on what does it mean to be a man? What does it look like? What's masculinity? What's good masculinity look like? Then the world of media, technology, films, shows. Did we talk about this a little bit?
We did.
The depiction.
We did.
So
yeah, but
that just
I like this
continues.
note here, and I'm going to mess with this really quickly. I like the note here that mentions the loss of camaraderie, brotherhood, and friendship around mission.
Yeah.
You wrote that down. I think we're more isolated now than we've ever been before. I read this statistic in a U.S.-based study, and this is from the Surgeon General's office. In a U.S.-based study, participants who reported using social media for more than 2 hours a day had about double the odds of reporting increased perceptions of social isolation compared to those who use social media for less than 30 minutes a day. Isn't it interesting? They call it social media, and yet what does it do? It drives isolation.
Yeah. We were of a generation where, sports, clubs, high school was a world of its own. And now we're in a world where high school programs are cut they're not even. Caleb, you might. This might be. You were probably the result of a lot of this, but I mean, programs. Mr. Holland's Opus, right? They're shutting down the music program. They're closing out music. PE classes. I mean, shop classes. We literally had to shop.
Yeah.
I mean,
wood shop
and automotive shop,
metal shop,
and you could take home ec.
Yeah, home economics. Yep, you could learn
typing.
how to bake.
I remember
type.
I had a typing class.
So
even the curriculum has changed in significant ways.
I took a sewing class for an easy credit. It wasn't easy, by the way.
Bloodied all your
all my fingers.
Yeah. So
they don't make thimbles big enough for my mitts.
That's funny. You could get those things you put on the bottom of chairs, you know, anti-scuff things.
Tennis ball.
You know, so you're talking about the use. I mean, all of that stuff matters. It just all contributes to this downward spiral of masculine confusion.
Yeah. So let's talk about. Yeah, it's interesting because we did a weekend, a couple week series, I should say, at our church about the elephant in the room. So pornography.
How much time we have?
Is
this
15?
Okay.
We got 15 minutes. Yeah, it's not enough time. But
these highlights and these lowlights and these contributions.
But the insidious nature of what's been designed to on multiple levels. It's a multifaceted attack on men and on women, and encourage the idea that women are objects, that they're there to be used, and even so far as to rewire the nervous system of the way your brain works.
We've never been. This is back to my point earlier about catching up. We're not. I'm not gonna leave this subject. Let's talk about it. But we've never been so knowledgeable now of chemical and chemistry in the brain. The whole what's our term? The way the brain, we still don't know a lot. We still don't know enough. But neurological pathways, how things get, you think cut, and how they begin to make themselves available to be patterns.
Right.
And so, yes, the whole physiological response to porn. And that age of 9, it's still the average age. It's fascinating. The average age is that 9, 10. Yeah, there's some 7 and 8 year olds. Yeah, there's some guys that they don't see it until 11 and 12. But there's something about that age that the enemy seems to be committed to. I don't know if it's, my theory is that younger, because the way it blows circuits in boys and probably girls, but just speaking from the masculine side, shame comes pretty hard and fast. Like I think the younger
you're doing something wrong.
The younger you are, it's so weird that maybe they will tell dad. Maybe they will, look what I found.
Yeah.
This is gross or weird or something.
Yeah.
But when you get of a certain age, it isn't. And I think that's why the average age is still in that 9 and 10 space, even with technology and the exposure, like you said, of using. Yeah, I mean it's a space where there's a addiction is now associated with it, and you're talking about a physiological response, an emotional response. You add untrained, uninitiated, unvalidated boys taking those questions to the screens. It kind of makes sense, but it's just not. It's the worst substitute ever.
Absolutely. And yet, if your brain's rewired it doesn't feel like it's the worst substitute ever, because you're getting a facsimile of intimacy. You're getting a false characterization of what intimacy is, but you are getting all of the air quotes benefits of intimacy with a woman without any of the emotional attachments or requirements or efforts.
Yeah.
It's an effortless way to be intimate, again, air quotes, with a woman.
Yeah.
And that's why it blows circuits and why it rewires pathways.
Some of the men that we've worked with in this space, it's an interesting thing. Usually when we're involved, they're trying to work out of some things.
Yeah. Trying to recover.
But their space too, in a particular thing with porn, I mean, we've heard a lot of interesting. This is the one I want to say that. Well, at least I'm not hurting anybody.
Oh man.
Feeling that, just that belief and that attitude that it's isolated,
harmful somehow, or not harmful
to me. It's just I'm not really hurting. I mean, that is how small that story gets, and the nature of it, though, like a lot of things, the nature of it is control. It's an industry that is all about consumerism and control. One of the best books I've ever read on this is Jay Stringer's book Unwanted, getting free from sexual behavior, unwanted sexual behavior.
Right.
So Jay Stringer, Unwanted, maybe you can throw that up there, and he offers such a similar path as to what we try to offer in the healing path. How do you, because don't stop, quit is you just described. This becomes addictive in a way that you need something else.
Yeah. You
need someone else. And what does that path to healing really, really look like? And how do you journey in that? Mm-hmm. So I think he's a specialist in this area, in counseling people that are not only hurt but hurting others, in this practice and in this lifestyle. And so I think he's the one I would invite our readers to get his book Unwanted. Mm-hmm. And tough, good, tough read. I think every dad should read it. It's
hard to read.
I think every male should read it.
Yeah.
Because it even, I love that Stringer even talks about the enemy. I was so, a couple chapters in, I'm like I was so wondering, is he going to bring this into
spiritual warfare
into this game? And I was so glad he did, and thought he did it effectively. Not too much, but definitely not a something approach. And so, I think this is it's kind of a result of uninitiated and unvalidated.
Yeah.
When we talk about
Unfathered.
the stages of masculinity and boyhood and then explorer stage, it's got to start. Mm-hmm. It's got to start in that 10-year mark, if not earlier. Mm-hmm. Did your dad ever talk to you about this?
Right. Tell the story of the Panera Bread meetings.
Yeah.
Because the most fascinating part of that whole thing is the statistic that came out of it.
When my girls were little, I just kind of tongue-in-cheek said, at some point when the boys come around, they're going to have to talk to Dad. And as long as they said ooh and yuck, I knew I was okay.
Yeah. Ew, boys.
But when they got to middle school, junior high,
started to change.
Because there's events and dances and things that boys are recognizing girls and girls for boys for very different reasons. That's another podcast we should talk about and get some younger guys in here for some of that conversation. But oh my gosh, so I ended up. I only got to take a few of these boys out before they
five or six of them.
Just
right?
a few, yep.
Yeah.
And the point was, we needed to talk. I wanted I wanted to, I think of that old program Scared Straight, where they bring the delinquents in and let the prisoners talk to them.
Oh yeah,
you know,
yeah, bring them to prison.
Yeah. But I
end up in here.
Oh man, so I took a couple of them to Panera Bread to talk, and in the interview, asked them if, here's a 14, 15-year-old boy, and I'm asking him if, all right, so this is about my daughter and me entrusting, her to you, and I just want to make sure that, you got your hat on, your hat. Yeah. You understand that I'm concerned already because I'm one of your kind, and so I want to talk about some things. Sure, Mr. Thompson, it's great. So, I'm eating and talking, and they're not eating at all. It's just, I wanted them to be a little nervous. So anyway, I asked them about a few questions in. I asked them about, well, what do you know and what's your experience with pornography? And the boys, the head would drop. I said, hey man, it's okay. It's not okay. It's okay. And, that's a concern. I said, has your dad talked to you about that at all? Have you talked to your dad about that? Zero of the boys.
Yeah.
So, well, what's a boy to do when his training program is other boys?
Yeah.
And now, they're not just handing over something that's a magazine or finding it there. You're
right there.
You're handing links over. You're sending the images and stuff.
Yeah.
So and that was before that time. So I do think generationally, SJ, in this particular subject, we could just go through the different generations and their categories, and yet I think this is something that has crossed. It has gained territory. It's gained momentum. It's morphed itself in different ways. It's accessibility, but the results are the same. It leads to a very confused and a very dangerous boy who will become a man and take with him the neural pathways, the spiritual forces that oppose intimacy and relationship, and create a scenario where he's going to use her rather than take care of her.
Yeah. And so can we encourage men, ourselves included, to say, man, I wish my dad had handled my heart differently. I wish another man had come along and handled my heart differently. Can we be that man? For other men, for younger men, for boys who are coming up. Can we turn the tide?
Well, yes. And I think it goes back to something you said. Well, you've been trained. So this is about retraining. This is about putting yourself in spaces where, because here's the cool thing. Even though it's hard. The healing of your masculine heart and soul is good for everybody. It's just good for everybody.
Yeah.
So, Heart of a Warrior is a place to start. King Me is a great place to go. The Healing of the Masculine Soul by Gordon Dalby. The Masculine Journey by Dr. David Hicks. Wild at Heart by John Eldredge. The Way of the Wild Heart, Fathered by God by John Eldredge. I mean, man,
go back through all of our episodes.
Get some man books.
Yeah, man. Go through the Stages of Masculine Journey podcast series that we did.
And who was I talking to just a few days ago? They were so excited that we were audible, that we were on audio, and that we, have because of their dyslexic challenge to read. They love that we have the books on audio.
Books,
and so anyway, I just, to your point about, is there any hope? I mean, if this is the insurmountable variables, and I've got 4 or 5 that we didn't even hit. I mean, if there's that much set against men being good, and yeah, that's just tricky when it comes out of my mouth. I'm like, so many men are, but if you have these things in you, and 90% of the time you're good, 70% of the time you're good. I mean, what percent
is good enough? Mm-hmm.
And these uninitiated, unattended to, uncared for places in your journey, wounding, mother wounds are real, very, very serious place to go when you start to explore our perspective and attitude about, yes, what a man is, but also what a woman is.
Mm-hmm.
And little girls are observing that, and little boys are observing the same thing and coming to conclusions that are set in a way that are going to deeply affect how they relate to one another. And so I think the healing path, was just talking with Tom about another guy, and he said the same question. He said, well, you think there's any hope what should we do? And I said, well, Tom's one of our speakers, presenters, and been on this podcast. And it wasn't a rhetorical question, but I took the opportunity and said, well, bro, you know the path. He's got to get off the path he's on and on the healing path. And until he does, it's going to keep going that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can go get him. We can go invite him. The AA community has a phrase that, until you're sick and tired of being sick and tired,
mm-hmm.
or until you hit your bottom.
Yeah. So,
a lot of men may not resonate with this because, kind of, I think of Juna and Bagger, like, well, keep on swinging then like that. Just keep on, keep on going.
As we're talking, and what we've been sharing through these last several episodes, it's a collective problem.
Yeah.
It's a community-wide problem, on a national, worldwide, global scale. But the answer is individual responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's not a
your comeback is your
collective, but what can happen, because we've seen it happen, is that each man decides, okay, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I'm going to do something different. And I don't think any man necessarily sets out on this healing path to say, I'm going to change the course of masculinity in the United States.
No, you don't have to do that.
They don't say that.
Mm-mm.
But if enough of us do it,
it will.
That's what will happen.
Because that's how we got to where we are.
Right.
Enough of us have arrived.
Enough of us have abdicated our
in this
responsibility.
desolate,
and so we've
crappy.
ended up here.
Yeah. This. Enough of us have arrived here. That, to your point, if enough of us would arrive here, it could change the landscape. And so, I think that's part of the hope that we have. And then the last session that I think we can do to be a good last session is, so how do we overcome loneliness? How do we overcome?
Might be two, maybe 3 more.
how do we overcome and become?
Yeah. Because score some wins.
Getting 4 sessions on what the problem consists of, I think is helpful.
And we just scratched the surface.
I think it's helpful. Yes. But you said it really well, and it's your version of all of that. It's your great grandfather
mm-hmm.
and grandfather mm-hmm. and dad.
Mm-hmm.
Look there.
Yeah.
It's your what you were taught or not taught about what a girl's for.
Mm-hmm.
It's what you have, how you have, and what you have, and how you still are experiencing any world of pornography.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding doesn't heal things, but it sure the crap helps.
Yeah. Yeah,
To
I like
getting,
the way
to,
you say
to
it.
getting on that path.
Yeah. X-rays don't set broken bones, but they diagnose the problem. Like
MRIs
you see what the problem is.
You spend a lot more money and
MRI,
get a lot deeper look, which I think we do need and want to eventually do. And I think that it's brothers. It's not what's wrong with you. It's what's missing.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe the journey with God is to initiate and validate you so you can be entrusted with power and authority and be good. And be good. And it's still fragile. It's still fragile. The enemy hasn't left me alone. I am not out of their target.
No. And it wasn't a
zone.
miraculous, all of a sudden everything's hunky-dory, although miracles can happen. But it's a journey, it's a process.
As it was to get here,
That's
it's
right.
going to be a bit of a journey and a process. But an intentional journey in a couple years can remedy 20, 30, 40 years of untrained, unfathered, unfinished, uninitiated. It can make a big difference. Love to talk about that next, because that's the remedy for loneliness and isolation is connection.
Yeah.
Connection with God,
Our relationship.
and connection with other men, like-hearted men moving in a similar direction, moving in the same direction. The healing path, the healing road, the healing journey, the recovery. I love our AA friends. I love our 12-step friends. I mean, there's a reason why there's millions of people, and there's reasons why there's millions of people that it has been successful for. Dude, let's do a podcast on that. There's a reason.
Yeah.
You talk about small groups all over the country. Not on Monday nights only, like BSF, which is great. Love BSF. All over the country.
What's BSF? Oh, BSF.
Bible Study Fellowship.
Oh, okay.
You can go anywhere Monday nights, and I'm talking about you can find a meeting.
No, yeah, any night of the week.
Church.
Probably within 20 miles of where you're
Wait,
standing.
let's go. Wake up. I mean, they have figured out discipleship. They have figured out training, retraining, and I think it's probably worth some attention.Maybe it's its own podcast. But I want to say there's a model that has some evidence of this. You can go from addiction.
People are hungry
to sobriety, and that's a big step. And then sobriety into training and reinforcing. So.
Yeah.
Good deal.
Yeah, man. So, next episodes we'll get into some of the what's the hope for men.
Yeah, the
our
journey,
relationship.
the journey back, the
It'll be good.
restoration, recovery, and the hope of masculinity. Because, again, if we are a big part of the problem, maybe we're a big part of the solution.
Yeah.
So, thanks for joining us on the Exploring More podcast. We'll see you next time.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoe.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the Life of More by visiting Zoe on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoe on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.